The only sound in the courtroom was the wall clock's steady ticking, and occasionally, a pen would scratch across. All eyes were on the man in the paper. Aiden Brooks, 35, uses a wheelchair. Now on, a decorated veteran of the Marine Corps. Criminal trespass trial and use of a deadly animal that can cause physical injury. He folded his hands and sat calmly, shoulders square and expression. Meet Valor, his service dog, a skinny and strong German shepherd, carrying a dutifully, a sleek black and tan coat sat beside him, still as a statue, with the exception of his gaze was fixed on the witness, stand erect and vigilantly observing across. The prosecutor's speech resonated throughout the room. She paced wildly in front of the ladies and gentlemen of the jury. This is not about military service or decorations. This is concerning a man who is experiencing tragedy without. He entered a private space after doubt reached a decision. He assaulted an innocent parent at home and he let a trained dog go, this time on a civilian, pointing straight at Valor. Combat-trained and bred dog not. There were whispers in the community from some gallery members are skeptics, while others are sympathetic. Aiden didn't respond because he didn't like. He had a blast in Hellman years ago, had stolen his walking ability and almost taken away his speech now the majority of the time, he allowed. He is court-appointed, and his silence speaks for him. The lawyer moved uneasily and visibly, surpassed by the forceful prosecution. David Renner, the witness on the witness stand, the alleged victim, used calculating. He simply bounded into the yard with confidence. That dog charged me without warning. Renner said, voice rising, but I didn't do anything. I was only supporting The ears of his own backdoor hero twitched. His eyes narrowed, and he released the smallest grumble so low that just those were under control would have heard from those around, but Aiden observed a little movement of his fingers, creating a subtle signal that has been practiced with. His thumb and the palm of his right hand tight too. Their code of valor stood with their fingers down. Throughout the room, there were gasps. Judge searched for manager animal, Mr. Brooks. Yet Aiden's bravery did not waver. Moved forward without snarling or lunging, simply making deliberate progress in the direction of the. Observe how his paws gently tapped the bailiff against the tile floor. Hesitated, uncertain about whether to step in. Renner moved uneasily in his chair. Pallid bravery halted 2 feet away from him, after which he gave a quick, loud bark. With a sudden flinch, bravery stepped forward, then took a whiff of the man's pant leg. Then, with a quick movement, he nosed. Renner's coat flap was opened, and she pulled, taking out a kid's plastic keychain toy, splattered in the shape of a cartoon dinosaur. Something black caused the courthouse to collapse. The judge stood in startled silence, eyes now slowly narrowing at the item. What's that? Renner lying on the floor. I don't know how that got out of control. Valor wasn't sitting next to the. Objected and turned to face Aiden. Nodded when the judge examined the. Get that tested immediately, Bafe. And then she turned to the voice-firm court chamber, which will go back to work right away. That dog just showed a shift in everything, including the distant gunshots, still reverberated in Aiden's thoughts today. Years later, Hellman's Red Sands. The province held onto the edges of his, like dust that wouldn't go away, memories. He had served as a platoon sergeant sharp before, steady and attentive under duress. His unit depended on him, and he had depended on one particular four-legged teammate. Bravery of a military worker dog that was taught in explosive detection and reconnaissance. When bravery was young, it was quick and persistent in detecting buried IEDs beneath rock strata, and in stillness in conflict, they trusted one another without speaking. Such a friendship wasn't only beneficial, was to survive, but the goal that altered anything that occurred during a regular exterior sweep. The group led by Lushker Hayden has just cleared a compound when a backup gadget exploded close to the back edge of the. Aiden was on the ground when the bomb tore it up. His back slammed after being flung several feet. He recalled hitting a concrete wall, the screams, the fire, and the sight. Bravery whimpering with one eye closed and bleeding. However, they were still crawling in his direction. Returned to the United States together. Aiden recuperated for months. His spine was beyond repair due to the blast. Fixed paralysis starting at the waist. His voice cords had suffered more damage. Speech trauma from shrapnel became weak. Shattered. Doctors advised him to get ready for a new lifestyle for the majority of. That would have required a retreat, but he inquired about valor for Aiden at every. One day, when he eventually discovered the military was getting ready to put the dog to rest. Due to his wounds and compromised vision, Aiden made a strong effort to adopt him. Documentation that appeals medical clearances. Regardless, he battled using the same. He had demonstrated calm intensity in battle. Ultimately, they gave their approval for the transfer. Both of them were broken, but they were. Aiden took Valor home after they were split up, to a little apartment somewhere outside of Pittsburgh. No relatives waiting, no welcome signs. 2 survivors were patched and scarred, attempting to recall what tranquility was. Intended to feel as though they are united, started the gradual process of returning to physical. Therapy wasn't limited to Aiden. It turned into their common practice as Aiden discovered how to move himself from his bed to a chair. Without help, Valor discovered how to stabilize him while receiving speech treatment. Aiden recovers bits of his voice, and he and Valor created a hand signaling system. Effective military-style orders, transformed in emotions that only they recognized. And Valor was shrewd and ferocious. Loyal excelled and discovered not only signals, but feelings flutter in. Aiden's gaze can cause him to move. Too much breath would cause him to. It was more than just training the phone. It was a natural reaction to a shared trauma. Aiden didn't attempt to be a hero. He didn't ask for gratitude because he wanted attention. He just had a meaningful, peaceful life. He fixed neighbors and helped where he could. Fences, kids' bike repairs, and old combat boots to a shelter for the needy, and never a service, but always bravery at his side. Dog is a comrade, not a pet, and the only one who had braved flames and decided to. It started with a sound that Aiden hadn't heard, a youngster sobbing for a long period in. It was past midnight and it was dark. The neighborhood was back to its normal routine. Silence, the type that encircled the tiny road like a soiled blanket. Aiden was dozing off in his chair, brave, coiled at his feet as soon as the dog, sharp eyes and abruptly stiff ears, concentrated on the window before the low. Aiden rolled over and growled low warning. Initially, he heard someone crack the window. Nothing. Then a muffled sob came again. Little, desperate, strangled out of the house. The house next door had just been. A young couple with a little budget rented it. Boy, it had only been 2 weeks since they moved. Previously, Aiden had not communicated with. They gesture a lot here and look there, yet the man had always felt something. Aiden's instincts took over and triggered the security camera outside that he'd placed in front of the side alley between. What he observed of the 2 houses made the lens caught the cold blood. A man's shadow pulling a youngster by the boy's arm into a poorly lighted room. Fought to kick his tiny hands, flailing, followed by the obvious slapping action, followed by another Aiden. His heart thumping, he reached for his phone and made a trembling 911 call. Next, I'm going to report suspected child abuse. He said, "What's your proof, sir?" At the door. "I saw that on camera," the dispatcher inquired. "Have you got any clear video of the physical?" "Yes, it's shadowed, but you can still cause harm." Hear the sobbing without seeing it. Proof of abuse. We'll have to submit a report and monitor the youngster unless they are. We are unable to act when there is an immediate risk. Aiden looked at the phone at this moment, in shock that he is in imminent danger. "I can appreciate your worry, sir, but convention." He didn't sleep at all because he kept hanging up. The sun dawned dully the following morning, and gray, there was a knock across the street. When he opened his door, he discovered the little boy, shivering, standing there, swelling cheek, barefoot, and he had bruises all over his little arms. He was no older than 6 years old. He simply gazed up at the sky without saying anything. Then Aiden moved forward, curling. Aiden pressed himself against the man's chest. He immediately brought the boy, covered him on a blanket inside, and provided. He called the child after giving him water. Direct protection services while. As he waited, he showed the lying boy Valor, softly waving his tail at his side. "This is bravery," Aiden muttered. "He guards. You're safe now, people." Hours later, when a caseworker showed up, the boys' dad stormed to the front door, growling and flushed. "You believe you. Can you take my child?" he yelled. Aiden clutched and attempted to block the path. However, his wheelchair was unable to go quickly, sufficient before the man could get to him. With a burst of fur, Valor leaped forward and rage erupting between the man and Aiden, barking so loudly that it shook the Valor bit his walls as the man attacked. Armed to stop the man, not to maim him, staggered back and shouted just as the CPS security and a caseworker hurried in. However, the man filed after the damage was done. Allegations that Aiden had abducted his son, entered private property without permission, and utilized the dog as a weapon to cause physical injury. He portrayed himself as having come from an adult with post-traumatic stress disorder. The veteran who started the story, by the court date, "It's too quick," was set, and the local media branded Aiden as the erratic combatant who allowed his dog to assault a defenseless father. But Aiden didn't reply and didn't pursue. He didn't defend himself in interviews. He waited online, and Valor, the courtroom was noticeably colder than usual. Fluorescent lights hummed in the morning. Overhead, when the meeting started up again, Aiden sat in his wheelchair silently, his hands laying next to him in his lap. As stone stance alert, Valor sat motionless, eyes seeing everything that moves around them. Melanie Renner, the child's neighbor across the room, Mom, took the witness stand and looked at, were watery, and she had practiced her voice. Obviously received coaching, my hubby he's. She stared and replied, "Not a violent man. Simply put, there has to have been a miscommunication. He wouldn't harm not my son, purposefully." Aiden didn't blink and didn't say anything, but his jaw tensed. The prosecutor gave a small nod, as though pleased. "And as far as you know, Mr. Do Brooks ever come onto your land without permission?" She said, "No, I never observed him acting in such way." "Did he ever threaten your spouse or yourself?" She paused. "No." A protracted silence descended upon the courtroom. Then Aiden gradually lifted his. The fingers on the right hand curled into a clear action and a subtle, crisp indication. The ears of Valor twitched as he calmly rose, but concentrated and started to go in the direction of the. Observe how the bailiff stepped instinctively forward, but the judge held up a hand to allow him to enter the room, held its breath together. Bravery ceased. She became noticeably tense in front of Melanie. Her hand automatically moved to the Valor's nose inside her coat pocket, approached it carefully, purposefully, and then with a single, soft move, he pushed his, dug into the cloth, and extracted a. It was a simple necklace for a young child. Trinket, plastic charm, blue string. Resembled a star, but the star itself was. The rope was broken and speckled with. Gasps of dried blood broke out throughout the. Melanie's face became white in the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. "Do you, Miss Renner, acknowledge this? But I'm not sure where that started when she stumbled." "It's not mine." From the rear of the space, a voice said, "That's mine, everybody." Sat down with a CPS in the gallery. The young worker stood shaking. "He shattered my necklace with tears. I was saved by the bravery that poured down his cheeks." There was utter silence in the courtroom. The youngster then raced straight down the aisle. He wrapped his arms around Valor. The brave dog's neck once licked his cheek. He gave a soft, comforting whine. From the necklace, the judge glanced at the Melanie's son, who had started crying. Silently, with guilt in her eyes, "I didn't know how to stop," I muttered. "Him." The prosecutor frantically attempted to recuperate. "This is an emotional objection. The dog is being utilized for manipulation." The judge interrupted him calmly, but forceful. "Counselor, sit down." She turned her, looked back at Aiden, then at Valor. "Saw trained dogs obeying commands," she remarked, slowly, "but no one has ever delivered to me justice." She inhaled deeply, and then spoke. "Throughout this procedure in the courtroom is now about anything other than Mr. Brooks. I'm placing an order for something far deeper. Prompt examination of the house, David and Melanie Renner's lives. The following charges are made against Mr. Brooks. Suspended while awaiting termination." Aiden slowly inhaled. Bravery returned to his side, lying down as though nothing had happened. Although something spectacular had occurred, the reality had been rather explicit when Aiden did not make the decision official. There were no applause or cheers to rejoice. Fists simply a silent expression of appreciation and his hands' delicate contact with Valor's head. The accusations were withdrawn. He was. Days later, free David Renner was taken into custody. Once the inquiry verified the young boy was subjected to protective custody is at last secure, and the footage of Valor finding the jewelry. It went viral on the internet in court. 12 million views in a single week, obtained by headlines from all the main news outlets. Red, a silent hero dog reveals mistreatment in startling courtroom incident between a veteran and a service dog saved the child and revealed the truth. Reporters descended on Aiden's modest house. Book, documentary, talk show, and deals. Invites. Everything happened at once. However, he said, "No thank you" to each of them. Told a reporter, this story wasn't for financial gain, but rather for one boy who, lacking a voice, Aiden instead took the money that people sent and spent them to start a modest nonprofit. The mission of the group Hands and Paws training service dogs was easy for veterans with speech impairments, PTSD, and physical impairments, particularly those who formerly thought they had nothing in common with Aiden. Within a year, a location left in the world, Hands and Paws was assisting numerous veterans from all throughout the state arrived, uncertain about their future, broken and haunted. They departed with a companion, a goal, and a new motivation to proceed and courage. He became the center of everything in a single tumble. In the afternoon, Aiden arrived at nearby auditorium of an elementary school for a Veterans Week was the speaking event, and he and Valor were asked by the school to discuss service with the students. The children's bravery and tenacity were wide-eyed, listening to what he said, spoke sparingly, but when he did, it was measured and significant. He let the remainder to. At the end of the conversation, a girl displays courage. She held out her hand in the front row. The tone of Mr. Brooks' voice was gentle. Truly understand the meaning of justice, Aiden glanced down at the prostrate dog, softly tapping his tail at his feet. He grinned on the ground and answered no. But he understands that love requires a pause, because justice is never more than that. There was a quiet silence in the room before. Bursting into cheers, Bravery gazed up at Aiden and then back to the kids as though he comprehended every word. And perhaps he did. Some truths have to be kept quiet. Certain pains are too intense or too fresh for yelling, but occasionally a calm look, standing quietly like a faithful buddy. All it takes to say a lot is a guard. Valor and Aiden didn't require speeches at all. One soldier's body was fractured, and the other, dog abandoned by the conflict. Yet together they created something indestructible, a tale of trust, honor, and silence. Justice. They didn't yell or scream. I begged them to just show up for each. For the truth, another for a child, because the loudest voice in the room can occasionally is quiet, and occasionally a single bark at the ideal time is sufficient to awaken the world. For this is not merely the narrative centers on a man and his dog. What occurs when love doesn't return down, and the point at which loyalty turns into a language all its own, since ultimately the truth need not always be heard. It just must be viewed. I appreciate you watching this stirring tale of bravery and Aiden. Silently formed friendship put to the test by hardship and demonstrated in the greatest surprising ways that their story serves as a reminder, showing us that bravery isn't always loud. Sometimes a man whispers to another man, and his dog, it can be quiet at times. Signal that makes the world's truths visible. Attempted not to be affected by this story. Your heart made you or inspired you. Trust in the strength of love and loyalty. Once more, we encourage you to like, share, and, above all, sign up for Amazing Paws Stories brings you the actual deal. Poignant tales that honor the irreversible ties between individuals and amazing animal rescue tales. Resilience and redemption. Sign up now and become part of an expanding community that feels that every paw serves a purpose. Vaughn narrates a tale, and occasionally the loudest noises come from the quietest friends. Oh, these pause stories are incredible. Since some heroes are silent, they just remain.